This is Tim Bryce with my column titled, Why We Need a Middle Class. Do people truly understand the power of the middle class? I think they're starting to overseas. We may not have invented the concept of a middle class, but we sure perfected it, and everyone wants to emulate it. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, countries around the world have been reconfiguring their economic policies in order to remain competitive in a global economy. In case you haven't been paying attention, new middle classes have slowly emerged in such places as China, Belarus, Brazil, Russia, Vietnam, and among South African blacks. People in these countries now have spending power, thereby causing a demand for products and services, not to mention a call for construction of new houses and businesses. The rise of middle classes around the world is significant, as it is a recognition that capitalism works as opposed to socialism or communism. A sizable middle class represents an economic engine for a country. Capitalism encourages people to work and to invest and spend their money and allows a country to collectively compete. The average person wants nothing more than to earn a respectable livelihood so they can enjoy life and raise a family unencumbered by overbearing government regulations. As President Calvin Coolidge observed, quote, "After all, the chief business of the American people is business. They are profoundly concerned with producing, buying, selling, investing, and prospering in the world. I am strongly of the opinion that the great majority of people will always find these the moving impulses of our life." End quote. In order for capitalism to work, you need to be allowed to have certain freedoms, such as the freedom of expression, the freedom to innovate and invent, the freedom to choose your own path, the freedom to conduct legitimate business, and so on. This is why it is rather ironic how some of our former communist foes are now embracing capitalism. In the absence of a middle class, you have just the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, which lends itself to being a feudal state controlled by dictators and monarchies. Such a state does not operate harmoniously. Corruption is rampant and unrest is common. The have-nots, which is a sizable majority, have little to earn and spend. Consequently, the economy sputters and stagnates, which our communist friends discovered the hard way. As mentioned, in order for capitalism to work, certain freedoms have to be permitted to allow a person to work, earn, and save their money, not to have it redistributed to others by government decree. This means there is an explicit relationship between freedom and capitalism. Implicitly, it means capitalism requires a certain amount of democracy to allow the citizens to participate in how the government runs, which means capitalism cannot work under a dictatorship. See Cuba, Iran, North Korea et al. As an aside, it is the middle class who elects government officials, not the upper or lower classes. The upper class may support politicians economically, but it is the middle class that casts the votes. When someone asks me about my political leanings, I tell them I'm an unabashed capitalist. This, of course, means I believe in liberty and the right of the individual to lead a meaningful life, and I abhor any attempt by government to alter this or forcibly redistribute the wealth earned by the individual. I can understand government monitoring the legality of someone's occupation, but aside from this, they should not hinder a person's right to earn a living. Capitalism is our greatest export. It represents the seeds of freedom and economic prosperity. If it spreads, it could lead to world stability and peace, which, of course, certain tyrants and crackpots openly reject. For example, Iraq may be an interesting experiment in capitalism. If Iraq succeeds, freedom and democracy will succeed, which is why Middle Eastern terrorists desperately want to see it fail, as it represents a challenge to their authority. It's not so much about religion as it is about control. Capitalism is a genuine threat to feudalism, a system which has no regards for the rights of the human being and respect for the human spirit. Make no mistake, feudalism is barbaric. To summarize, first, in order to effectively compete in a world economy, you need capitalism. Second, in order for capitalism to flourish, you need freedom and democracy. Third, a byproduct of capitalism is a sizable middle class with spending power. And fourth, therefore, any attempt to challenge capitalism is a threat to freedom, democracy, and the middle class. No, I am not a proponent of government-sponsored bailouts, stimulus packages, or the creation of artificial jobs. Such devices does a disservice to capitalism and is unnatural. It is not government's role to tamper with capitalism, only to establish the environment for capitalism to flourish, namely assuring freedom and democracy, serving its constituents, and providing incentives to encourage new avenues of business. Yes, the failing financial companies and automotive manufacturers should have been closed. They were corrupt, made bad decisions based on greed and stupidity, and do not deserve any sympathy for their plight. If they had been allowed to fail, new institutions would have surely been created to replace them, which would have been leaner, stronger, and smarter. It's called evolution. By bringing back our right to fail, you assure our right to succeed. Friends, keep the faith. This is Tim Bryce in Palm Harbor, Florida. TimBryce.com.